got him to wave. That's something. Let's let's see if we can get him to say a few words.
Okay, so let's see. Oh, I think everybody can hear me. Isn't that kind of cool? So this is an experiment that Russ and I are doing, and I don't know, I think he's a little bit crazy, but then so am I. Kind of weird how much alike we are. I have more hair than him. All right, let's get back to the show, okay?
Yeah, okay. I'm going to skip 5 minutes. Let's switch through and see what happens. Okay, we're going to try this again. Let's bring in Mr. Flipchart. Now, I don't know if that music is going to kick in like it did before, but let's see what happens. Persistence, so valuable. Oh, hey, Neville, how you doing? I don't know whether this is going to work. I'm experimenting. I should actually bring Rusty in too so he could watch. Oh, well, whatever. What does math, infinity, and meditation have in common? Okay. I always find that, let's see, this shit, will it work? Yes, I think it did. I always find it interesting when the normals, especially, they talk about like absolutes, right? We live in a world of absolutes and it has to be proven and all that kind of stuff. And one of the ways they'll do that is they use math. Because math is absolute, right? Everything is measurable and calculable and all this kind of stuff, which is really somewhat ironic because in about 2 minutes, I'm going to show you how math doesn't have it all figured out. In many respects, not even close. Let's flip back. And actually, let's try this. So if Rusty didn't know what the heck I was talking about, we could do... Oh, okay, that was an experiment. We're experimenting here too. Back to the flip chart. Here's where I'm going to destroy it. Wake up. Now you wake up. Okay, we're good. Okay, think of this as time. Now, I realize time is not linear, okay? But just work with me on this. Okay, time, I'm going to go future and past. Future and past. Okay. Now, if you think about it, and this right here is the present moment. And of course, where is the present moment? The present moment is right here, right here. Okay. And so we can go into the future. So we can, I'm just making stuff up. We can go a minute. We can go an hour. We can go a day. We can go a month and on and on and on, right? And go a year. We can think back to a minute, an hour, a day, a month, a year, right? So we can go, I'm going to say this is a minute and this is a minute. Right. So then we could go maybe into seconds. So see how we're getting closer and closer to this exact present moment. We went from thinking like a year into the future to months in the future to weeks in the future, days in the future, hours in the future. Now we're thinking seconds into the future, right? So if this was a minute, so divide that into 60, a second to be right here, right? So you see how we're closer to the present moment, but we're not in the present moment yet, right? But if you zoomed out, see, and this is the thing, if you zoomed out, then it would look like maybe the second and the present moment are together because you've zoomed out. But of course, when you zoom in, think of magnifying, right? When you zoom in, think of Google Maps, right? You look at 2 points, they're this close. But when you zoom in, they get further and further and further. Not that they're getting further and further, you're just looking at it in more detail. So this is the same thing, right? So as we get seconds, then we have like microseconds, then we have nanoseconds. So we can measure shorter and shorter periods of time. Or if you look at this as a number line, where this is 10, this is 5, this is 1, this is 0.5, this is, we can go smaller and smaller and smaller numbers. But even though we're smaller and smaller numbers, we still haven't gotten to what? 0, right? 0 as in the present moment. Now, here's the cool thing about this. What does math, infinity, and meditation have to do with each other? What do they have in common? Well, they all deal with infinity. Think about it. 0 on a number like we will never, ever be able to get to 0. Because we can get closer and closer. Again, if it's numbers, right, we can get 0.1, 0.001, 0.00001. We can go get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, which brings us closer and closer and closer. But mathematically, we can never get to 0 because 0 doesn't exist as something that's measurable. We can get close to it. We can take smaller and smaller pieces. Right? We can zoom in more and more and more, but we never can get to 0. We have a perception of getting to 0, but we'll never get to 0. I mean, we see that all over the place. So, when they discover like microscopes and they discover, holy smokes, there's these things called molecules. That's the smallest thing, right? Then they discover, oh, well, there's not molecules. Now there's atoms. Well, that's the smallest thing. And of course, then they decide, oh, well, no, that's not right either because now there's subatomic particles. And then they get smaller and smaller and smaller. So whenever they think they've got to 0, right, to the smallest matter, they discover, oh, that wasn't smallest at all. I have to get smaller and smaller and smaller, closer and closer and closer. So we'll never get to 0. We'll never get, here's an interesting thing, we'll never get to the absolute present moment, at least not logically. At least not in a fashion that you can measure with a calculator, with a graph, with a chart. Because just when we think we've got there, we discover, no, you can get closer. You can get finer. At least from a logical perspective. But here's the thing. Even though we maybe can't measure our way there with our logic, it doesn't mean we can't experience it. Deepak Chopra. It looks like everything's working. Son of a gun. Deepak Chopra said something a long time ago. I believe he used the word bliss is the word he used. But he said bliss is that place that when you realize you're there, you're not. I always thought that was really cool because it really applies wonderfully to here, right? That place of absolute 0, which is where the meditative experience takes us, is not a journey, this is really good, is not a journey that we can take with our analytical mind. It's an experience we can have, but you don't have it analytically. You don't have it logically. You simply experience it experientially. Let's go back to our number line. See if I can get rid of some of this stuff. Oh, got rid of a whole bunch. There we go. Whoops. Oh, darn it. Oh, let's redraw this. Okay. We'll get it. Redraw this, right? So the present moment right here. When we're having a meditative experience, I'm going to change colors. What happens is our awareness is actually getting closer and closer and closer from the future to the present moment, closer and closer and closer from the past to the present moment. And there comes this place where our logic stops and our spirit kicks in. That's kind of interesting, kind of a neat choice of words. But anyway, the experience actually happens. As we get to here, we start to actually leave this experience of linear time, right? We leave the constraints of time, right? I've done teachings on this before as well. In many respects, a miracle is something that happens outside of the logical progression of time. It's really interesting how many times we define a miracle using time. What I mean by that is if we had all the time in the world, then this thing could be achieved one way or another. But so often it's related to time. It's going to take a miracle for this to happen in a time frame, whatever it is. If you had all the time, if you had infinite time, then there's nothing that's impossible because you never get to the end of time. So there's always a potential that it can manifest in these amazing ways. But when we're attached to the timeline, how are we attached to the timeline? Because we spend so much time reliving the past and pre-living the future that we spend in an analytical fashion in our mind that we skip over the magic, if you will, of that present moment. And it's in that present moment that we actually leave the constraints of this linear timeline. And then what happens, you probably will have heard this phrase before. Okay, here's my fancy artiste. This is terrible. You start to become the observer, not the participant. There's this thing that happens where it's almost like you step back and you observe, right? Flying in a plane, you look out and you look down and you see the ground, you see if it's a city, you see the city, you see all the activity. Hey, Michelle, how you doing? You see all these things that are happening. You're very aware of it, but you're not participating in it because you're whatever, 5,000, 10,000, 30,000 feet above it. For me, that's what meditation is. Meditation is a state of awareness. It's not so much something that we do. It's not something that we experience with our analytical mind, because our analytical mind is so tied into past, present, future. But as we let go of that, believe me, easier said than done, then what happens is we start to step back and become an observer of all these events that have happened, observer of all these pre-lived events that we play out in our mind, but we're not attached to them. Another way to say that is we're not emotionally attached to them. We're not, I'm picking words, we're not happy, we're not sad, we're not anything in between. We are simply observing all these events. Now, here's an interesting thing when it comes down to manifesting. One of the things we talk about, so many teachers talk about, is the feeling of the feeling as though the manifestation has already happened. And often what we attach to that is the excitement and rah, rah, and all that kind of stuff. But what's interesting is, not that there's anything wrong with that in its place, but what's interesting is that when we've attached that strong emotion, we're now participating in the timeline again, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But I believe, and I think it's even been my experience at times, that we can even step out of that emotional attachment to an outcome. And then it simply becomes a preference. This or this or this. You have a desire, and even the desire isn't like, oh, the strong desire. The desire is just kind of a mild preference. But because we're in that magical place of the present moment that's outside of our thinking mind, we are now not limited by time in any way. So it doesn't matter how long you've been in a specific set of external circumstances, because in a moment they can change. Not so much when you're attached as a participant, then you kind of have to, you're limited by time. So it's this, then this, then this, then this. But as we're able to slip outside of that and observe it, we are also not limited by it. So then we simply observe, we create in our mind without a really strong desire at all, kind of a mild preference, this or this or this or this. And because of that, we're now limited by time and, of course, space, because they're two aspects of the same thing, which allows that manifestation process to happen unfettered by our attachment to that, I don't want to say prison, but it almost feels that way sometimes, of linear time. Oh, I've been in this situation, whatever it is, for so long. It's going to take me so long to get out of it. Or here I am and I want to go over here, but it's going to take so much time to get there. I'll never be able to get there, right? You see, we don't have any of those conversations. They happen in our analytical mind, logical mind. You don't have any conversations when you are here as the observer. It's an experience, not that you have here, that you have here. Got anything to say about that, Rusty? Hold on. Where's my mouse? Got anything to say about that, Rusty? No. I'm going to do this. Intro again. It's fun. Anything to say about this, Rusty? Well, damn, it didn't work. Okay, I'm done. I might as well quit while I'm ahead. Easy. Anyway, thanks for tuning in and this experience. There you go. Share. We're all in this together. See you on the web.